a couple of items. If you'd like to participate in audience communications, you can find blue slips on the same table just outside the door to my left. If you're interested in participating in audience communications, and I do have a couple people indicating such at this time, please make sure you fill out a blue slip and hand it to anybody at the board table so I can make sure to call on you at the appropriate time. Livonia Public Schools takes with pride our communities with character, and at the top of that list is respect. Everyone in this room has the commitment of this Board of Education that we will treat one another and everyone who participates in our meeting this evening with respect, and we would request that everybody else who is participating do the same. We find that is the very best way to teach our children, which is by example. We are going to get into our agenda this evening. The first item on our agenda is audience communications. Audience communications is by design a time for the board to listen to members of the community on whatever topic they wish to talk to the Board of Education about. It is not a question and answer session, as the board may or may not have any information about the topic which you are discussing this evening. The role of the Board of Education is to hire and evaluate the superintendent, to set policy for the district, and to set the long-term goals and align the finances to those goals. So we really have very few responsibilities that are truly the board's. If you have a specific question and it requires an answer and it pertains to one of those areas, you can expect an answer from the Board of Education. If you have a specific question and it falls under any other item, which frankly is most other topics, we consider that daily operations, and your answer to your question would come from one of the members of our administrative team. At times, there are not specific questions, but rather simply comments that you'd like to share, and we are happy to listen. Our audience communication is limited to 3 minutes per person. The reason that we set a time limit is so that we can be fair and equitable to everyone who speaks before the board. We'll set a timer, so if that timer starts to go off, you can know that that's your cue to wrap up your comments. And we do that so that we find that that's a little bit more respectful than trying to interrupt a speaker. So if you hear that tone going off, you can know that it's time to wrap up your comments. The first person who would like to speak with audience communications this evening is Shelby Hooper. Ms. Hooper, you can feel free to join us at the table. There are a couple microphones there.
Is it okay if she comes with me because we're here together?
Each person will have 3 minutes to speak.
That's okay.
So one person can speak and then the next person can speak, as opposed to a dual conversation. But Shelby Hooper will be our first speaker this evening. Feel free to have a seat. And you can just, tap that microphone and it'll turn green and you're good to go.
Okay.
There you go. We will hear from Ms. Hooper. We also have a slip from Ms. Zimmerman, and you're Ms. Zimmerman, as I remember.
Yes.
Okay. You'll be the next speaker, Ms. Zimmerman.
Thank you. Okay, so I won't take up the whole 3 minutes. My main concern is my child's safety in the classroom. A lot of things are happening in the world right now, and now there's a lot of talk going around my child's school about children being very disruptive. I'm talking lockdown situations in classrooms because of a child being so disruptive, throwing tantrums, chairs, cussing, even finding ways to listen to inappropriate music on the school Chromebooks. And this child has gone from school now to our school, and now he's from one classroom to another, and now he's in my son's class, and he's threatened my son's friend. So I'm just curious, if you guys can answer, is what are you guys doing to protect our children in the classroom?
And Ms. Zimmerman.
Yes, and I was at the last meeting, and I'm still waiting for my question to be addressed in terms of how do you plan to keep the children safe in the classroom. I have not been given a clear answer, and unfortunately, the situation that happened, again, it was unfortunate. The police were involved. I will be getting a copy of the police report. They called me today to let me know it was available. Upon the recommendation of the police officer, they did recommend to, I believe, the school district that this child not return. Somehow he's back at the school. Although he's been placed in a different classroom, he's still at the school, which is concerning to me because that behavior is volatile behavior. It happened last school year that I've been made aware of, and now it continues to happen. So I'm really concerned. I asked a question last week about your zero threat policy. I was told we don't have one. It's called a zero to ignore. Not quite sure what that policy means, given what's happening in the world today with the kids, what happened at Oxford. I feel like Livonia school system is behind the mark if you have a zero ignore versus a zero tolerance policy. So I still have a concern. My questions have not been addressed. Thanks for sending the therapist to the school to speak with the kids that were struggling, because come to find out, a lot of kids in the classroom were struggling based on the virtual meeting we had last week with Mrs. Kohler and Dr. Taylor. It was parents that were unaware of what was going on in the classroom, but they knew something was going on with their kid. Again, I'm still asking the same question: what are we doing to protect the safety of our children while they're at school? I purposely pulled my son from school Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday because I had to travel for business, because this child was allowed to return. And so I can't be an airplane right away, knowing that I'm still unclear of the safety policy and that this child has been allowed to return. So I still have the same question, and I will probably come to every school board meeting until someone answers my question. So, thank you.
Thank you. And as I said at the beginning of the meeting, this type of question will be answered by our administration, and I will ask that our administration get back with you on your answer to your question.
Thank you. And I just ask that it's not a glossed over answer. It's not related to mood meters. I really need to know what are we doing to keep our kids safe in the classroom, and explain the zero ignore versus zero threat policy that other school districts have taken on. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anybody else here this evening that would like to participate in audience communications? Seeing none, we're going to go to the next item on our agenda, which is Committee of the Whole. I don't have any items under specifically Committee of the Whole. Mrs. Oquist, do you have any?
We do not.
Okay. We're going to move on to Building and Site, and I will turn it over to our Building and Site Chair, Mr. Centers.
Thank you very much. We have several items this evening, the first of which, all of which are very exciting, but the first of which is very exciting for those of us who have been waiting eagerly to see the Early Childhood Center that will be in development. Mr. Francis, do you feel like getting us started here with the design of drawings of the Early Childhood Center?
Thank you, Mr. Centers. Good evening, everybody. I'm going to start off with, 3A is the Early Childhood Center design drawings. We have with us Melanie Hall and John Castellana from TMP Architecture, so I'm going to invite them up. And I'm also going to invite Brian Weber, a well-known face here at this table, Plant Moran Cressa owner's rep. Mostly, we're going to pass it over to Melanie and John to be able to give a presentation to the board and to the public of some of the design features, et cetera, for what the planning has been for the Early Childhood Center that is proposed at the current Dickinson site. Welcome, everybody. Are you making a mess on the table already?
Yes, I did. Sorry, I apologize.
It's just water.
Good evening.
We're going to ask that they flip over to the presentation in the recording room. Thank you very much.
All right, good evening. Thank you for having us. I really appreciate being here to give you an update on the Early Childhood Center. Thank you. Sorry about that mess. So we're going to talk about progress on the Early Childhood Center. We're also going to talk about budget and schedule. Whoops. Can you get it closer, maybe?
No, it doesn't work. While we're getting that together, I'll just reminder to the board and the community that this is a hallmark portion of our 2021 bond issue request. We're very pleased to bring this to you this evening. As you know, there are many elements of this bond about which we are very excited. Tonight, you're going to hear two distinctly separate pieces of information, but this will highlight our progress thus far, and I've been keeping you updated on a number of design meetings we've held and planning meetings for the Early Childhood Center. As you know, we had the opportunity to visit many and many new centers in the region, which really helped formulate our thinking. I want to give special thanks to Dr. Terrio, Mr. Green, and Dr. Dodge, who have all been instrumental in helping us plan for our littlest learners. So this really is a very exciting project for us. It is the first new build in well over 50 years for our district, and so we are very excited about that. So I will turn it over to our colleagues from TMP, and they'll talk a little bit about our process and then share some renderings with you.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Allison, for pushing that forward. So our progress to date, we always start out with the program and planning verification, so this helps us all understand how many classrooms we need in there, how many students will be in there. We're looking at right now what we need and even future and trying to get that. So we're always right-sizing as we go through the process. And then we'll move on to a schematic design phase. That's taking all those Excel spreadsheets that you put together in the program and kind of starting to lay them out in a plan and understand how that all works together, circulation, safety items, things like that. And then throughout all of these, with those major milestones like schematic design and programming, we're always sitting down and having an owner review where we're page turning through everything and showing everyone what we've talked about through our design meetings. After schematic design, we go through design development, and that's a little bit more detailed, as you recall, and we're really starting to understand how the design is developed and then further into what we call construction documentation. Those are real detailed drawings, and those are the drawings that we use in conjunction with the construction management team to get the building built. Okay, any questions? All right, so let's get to the good stuff here, okay? So our site is at Newburgh, and it's in between 6 and 7 Mile at the Dickinson Elementary. Is everyone familiar with that? And so you'll see on here, the pink area is the existing building. I heard that. Oh, we'll talk about your river. He asked, where's the river? So the pink building there shows you what the existing building is. It's about 120,000 square feet. So through programming and all that verification and the discussions there, we right-size the Early Childhood Center. And that's what you see in the dark blue. That's the Dickinson building that we're keeping. The rest of the building goes away. And then the new addition is the green portion in the plan. So total now, we're looking at 72,000 square feet. So again, through programming and design, we're right-sizing that. We went through a lot of investigation and research to understand what part of the existing building should be taken away, where does it make sense even from a structural standpoint, utilities and such like that. So we've ended up with the blue part, and that is, right now, that's your gymnasium over there for the most part, and then we've added on. And what's so wonderful about this site, when you're at Newburgh, you will see this as soon as you drive either way. So if you look at that, it's north is up. You're gonna drive by and you're gonna see this gorgeous building. Right now, the Dickinson is kind of far back. It's a little bit difficult to see. This is gonna stand out and be majestic. Next.
You can use the.
Oh, yes, okay. Yay. So this is our floor plan. We'll walk you through this, and then we'll get a little bit further into renderings and really kind of seeing what's inside. So at the front of the building, right at Newburgh, that will be your main entrance. For new parents, for prospective parents, for guests, you would come and park up there. Bus drop-off will be at the front as well. So that cyan color is showing you administration. So you walk in with a safe and secure vestibule, you walk into the Welcome Center, and that's your admin with offices and conferences up front. And then you walk down the entry corridor. The green spaces up at the north are classrooms. Those are half-size classrooms. And then we get further into the plan, and we've set it up into pods. And there's 3 pods, and they have 6 classrooms. and they share a family room. And this here, we want those young learners to come in and feel at home. So we've called it a family room. And then that next room that they get into is a mud room, which is exactly what you think it is. It's where you're gonna kick off your dirty boots, your jackets, your backpacks, everything dirty and messy goes in there, goes in the cubbies. We're shown in there. What's neat about this is once you're a parent and you're in the program, instead of driving in the front there, you're actually going to drive around to that mudroom area. There's parking along there, and that's where you would park, depending on what classroom your child's in. And there'll be indicators of different colors. We have columns out there, and whatever mudroom you're associated with, there'll be an accent color like purple, and the columns out there are purple. So that's always kind of easy wayfinding. We want it to be easy for those parents to get into the building there. So as you walk down, you're going through these mudrooms, family rooms, and then here at the end to the east side, southeast side, is the existing building. The large lime color is the gross motor. So that's where those kids, there's plenty of room for those kids to run around, ride bikes, cartwheels, use their muscles, right? They need to get their wiggles out. So we've got a great space there, and we have a wonderful rendering that will kind of show you more about that. And then we were very fortunate to get 6 more classrooms in this existing space all the way here on the east side. And the intent is that these 6 classrooms, even though we're working within the constraints of the existing building, existing columns, those rooms are similar to all of these rooms. So if you're in there, you're not really going to be like, oh, this is just a renovated room. No, it's going to look gorgeous. It's going to be set up the same way, the same, classroom finishes, all of that. So all of this will look gorgeous as the students make their way through there.
And there's a mudroom there too.
Right. Next to that, then adjacent to those 6 classrooms, we were able to get a mudroom over there too. So just equity, trying to get everything the same there, keeping all the classrooms the same, so all the students feel good. And there's the Dickinson that it is today.
So I'll take you through just some of the exterior and interior design of the building, just to give you a little better feel of all of the kinds of finishes that we're looking at, and just the overall 3-dimensional character of the new Early Childhood Center. I have to say, I've been doing this for 50 years at TMP, and it's so much fun to work on early childhood centers, and these are great. We've had some wonderful discussions, and I know there's a lot of staff here tonight as well. It's a highlight of my career. We work on big high schools and everything else, but doing something for the young learners is it's so rewarding. And hopefully you see that in the design of this project as we go through. Which one? That one, thank you. So this is a view, if you were flying in on a drone from Newburgh coming in, and you see the drop-off zone where you see that white car that's right there. That's the main entry, and that's depicted with a nice canopy, nice sheltered area. You see the archway on the left-hand side, sort of the trademark of Livonia schools. We have that as well, and that's right on axis with the new main entry to the school. Here's a little better view of that coming through and seeing the building. And as Melanie said, you're not going to miss this building when you're driving on Newburgh at all. I mean, it's front and center. And that was a parameter, I think, as we started to vision the project. It was really making this very visible for the community and having a much more playful kind of a quality for the young learners. It's very different and less institutional than a lot of school buildings are. As you come into the building, there's a nice open welcome center, nice ample window openings, and we're using, sort of the big house kind of a feel to it, the kinds of more residential quality to it. We have a lot of wood trim, maple trim that we're bringing into the building and in certain parts of the facility. But this is the Welcome Center desk coming in and being greeted and then being able to go through a very gentle security methodology, but very, very open and very, very deliberate. As you then receive clearance to come into the building, you start working your way through the main circulation, we call it the pathway, coming through. And we have some little niches along the wallway that are just strictly for the kids. You know, having a spot that they can just cuddle up with a book and just, it's their space. And using the different colors that we're going to be using throughout the building. So as we're coming through that area, we have a little bit of playfulness on the floor finish as well, just to have some areas the kids can do a little hopscotch. They can do some different kinds of activities within that area. Here's a view of one of the family rooms. And as Melanie said, this really is an area that has 6 class areas around that family area. And those clusters of 3 and 3 classrooms also have teacher planning centers that are associated between pairs of classrooms. And we also have the ability for some observation so that a parent could come in and see how their child is doing, and you can sort of do that a little hidden so that the child is not aware of that. Can use that as a real teaching kind of a tool as well. But here's a view of the family room. Here's another view of the family room. It's going to be outfitted with flexible furniture, a variety of floor finishes within that area, a wood ceiling. You see a glimpse of that in this rendering. Again, to bring that warmth and more of a residential kind of a feel into the project. Here's a typical classroom setting, all flexible furniture as well. You notice the large window areas. The sill is very low so that kids can see outdoors, whether they're sitting or standing within the space. And then the little trademark round window, which again is a spot that they can just really be a spot just for them to be able to. Here it is again. I'm sorry. One of the mud rooms, as Melanie mentioned, this is really where you kick off the boots. You come in right from the outdoors. You go right into the mud area. There's benches that are built in, cubby areas. You can unload all of your activities. So you're coming in from the north side as the day starts, and then on the south side of the mud room, you go out to the play area. So there's a major play space on the south side of the building. So it's a good sequence that the kids can then get their boots back on, their coats back on, and be able to go right out to the play space as well. Just another view of that mud room. The floor finish that you see here is all, what's the right terminology? Walk-off, thank you. Walk-off carpeting in this entire area, so it's real maintenance-free, and you don't have to worry. You don't have to be putting runners down or anything like that. The whole area is available for the kind of use that this space will certainly get. Gross motor skills room. This is the existing, part of this is the existing gymnasium that now is over at Dickinson. So we've been able to capture that space and really make it a major feature for gross motor development for the young learners. Another view of that as well. It's a nice open space. We have some decorative clouds in the ceiling that are acoustical, and you see acoustical paneling going around the outside, and we've also brought in natural light into the space to really enliven it, and you see the nice play of shadows on the floor as well. So it's be a fun activity zone, and is a nice use of the existing building to be able to reimagine part of that building. Okay, now we're going to have a little music, and you can watch a little animation here. Do I have to hit it again? Oh, there, it's going. Whoops. We went through a lot of versions of music to get something that was a little bit upbeat for the children from that standpoint. I wanted to mention a couple of things on the exterior design of the, maybe we can go back to a couple of these. Can we do that or not? Let me just highlight a couple of things for you. I didn't really talk about that in a lot of detail. A little bit hard to see right here, but the building has a brick base that goes all the way around, and that base goes up to about 2 feet, and it goes all the way around the building. And then the rest of the exterior, again, is very non-institutional. It's made up of hardy siding. Do you know hardy siding, which is a cement board that simulates clapboard or shingles? And we're using shingles up to a certain level. You see the different coloration on the drawing there, and then the lighter color that you see up above would be clapboard. So again, it has that more of a residential kind of a feel, but no maintenance to the exterior of the facility as well. And then over the mudroom areas, or over the family room areas, you see a little bit of a pitched roof there with some triangular window areas. And again, we're bringing natural light in, but it's a nice playful kind of a form. And you're going to be seeing that from the exterior as you're driving into the building. And the kids certainly will appreciate it. And the time of day, the light quality, again, that is the shadowing that you're going to get on the floor, I think is really going to be fun for the children. So we're excited by it and hope that you like what you saw tonight and answer any questions that any of you have.
I'm just going to jump in real quick. First of all, John and Melanie, thank you very much. I mean, it really was a beautiful and fun presentation that was put together digitally like that. When you look at that last shot that we had a moment ago, you can see sort of the playground that's on the exterior as well. So there is a playground that's going to be up front, but there's also, and it's hard to see if you look closely at it, and it's obviously not on the screen anymore, it's going to have fencing around it, not a traditional cyclone fence or what some people call a chain link fence, but a nicer black, and I'm going to say wrought iron in the general sense, not that it's actually a wrought iron fence, but something that more of decorative and design around it to be fencing. And I know we've said multiple times how forward this is. I feel like we've said it to the point where we're in the left turn lane of Newburgh Road suddenly, and we're just not. You could see from some of those renderings, there's a whole parking lot in the front that's on Newburgh. There's grass, parking lot, an island, more of the circular parking lot, and then, but as compared to where Dickinson is currently, it is very forward, which is why we are excited to bring it up. But I just want to make sure that folks don't think that we're putting 4-year-olds out playing on Newburgh Road.
Questions?
Just comment, really. This is so exciting. This is one of the big hallmarks of this bond that we just passed, and we are so thrilled. We've been seeing early childhood centers in some of our neighboring communities, and they're amazing. And we are just so thrilled. We've served our littlest learners for so long, and in existing facilities. We've done a great job of doing that, but it's exciting to be able to see now what the next chapter of early childhood really looks like, and that I'm so thankful that our community has supported this to the degree that they have, and it is very, very exciting. I can't wait to get inside.
I know.
Any other questions or comments? Ms. Bradford, are you? Go ahead.
Yes, I'm just thrilled. I'm excited. This is something that I think all of us as board members, when we talk about looking into the future, this was one of our things that we really wanted to settle on. And it's exciting to see that it's really going to come to fruition at some point. And the design looks just so exciting and colorful and just right online. I know a lot of research was done and looking at other facilities to set it up and get it going. So I'm just really excited about the project and can't wait for it to get started.
Mrs. Costa.
Along with what everyone else has said, I love the great use of the space. Like just that, the land, if you've driven by Dickinson, every time you're like, man, I wish. And so this is just a great rendering of just use of that space to maximize just the offerings for the community. So I love that.
And if you take a look at the layout, and if you take a look at page 6 in your packet, I don't know if we can throw that back up on the screen or not, but it's designed to have each section come out just a bit. I don't know if it's probably easier to see on our sheet than it is on that screen, but you see from the front how you'll see a portion of each of those sections from the front. You saw that from the overhead view, how the use of the land in that space, and maybe even that overhead view from the start. Are you not controlling that? Okay. Yeah, and so as you think about it, obviously oriented from Newburgh Road, you're able to see more of that space as opposed to just seeing the front of the school and then it going straight back. It really builds and utilizes on an angular way across that space, and then the playground wrapping around that. And so a lot of intentional thought about the entry points for children, for families, for staff to be able to exit out to the playground area and back in. And then really that large gross motor room is a significant size. And so the activities that can take place in there, whether it's on trikes or utilizing that space in different ways to have some different tactile experiences. And really there's design elements throughout, whether it's the finishes on the walls or areas, sections that can be colored in, some tactile sections of the wall space as you go through the hallways for students, really thinking about what our learners at that age may need. And so that came feedback to us about what some of those elements would be that may not exist right now, and those were incorporated into these spaces.
And I think some of the other spaces, when we worked quite a bit with Katie Dodge, the principal at Jackson, and hearing what there is at Jackson and what there isn't at Jackson currently, and a lot of that was spaces for meetings or conferences or testing or those types of things. So I know in a couple minutes, Brian and I are going to talk about, mostly Brian, I'm going to make him do it, talking about the budget and where we're at, and keeping in mind that Jackson is 40-some thousand square feet. I believe it's around 42 or 43,000 square feet. This, as it's currently rendered, is about 70,000 square feet. So there's a huge difference there in the space, and what that allowed for is to have offices up front, to have a welcoming center, to have spaces for teachers in between the classrooms, to have that workspace. So it's just flat out larger, which is, and as you build per square foot is something that occurs when you talk about the cost. But it was very helpful to go through the process. You start in one place, and then you learn and you rework, and you learn and you rework, and you keep getting input, and that's that journey. That's just part of the journey of doing something like this. This is the first standalone new build in this district in over 50 years. So we wanted to make sure we paid it the appropriate amount of attention.
So I'd like to ask Dr. Terrell to just spend a few minutes on some of the design elements specific to the children and the programs.
Thank you very much. Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So just a few of the unique design elements that we have. So again, working with Dr. Katie Dodge, the principal at Jackson. So we talked a lot about the age arrangements of our students. So as you can flow through the areas, we will have childcare, fee-based preschool, ECP, and then GSRP in these program areas. So we're going to start with our youngest learners at the front of the building, and as the children get older, they move to the back of the building. So again, we will have all 2-year-olds in one area, 3-year-olds in an area, 4-year-olds in an area, so that they will be sharing the same family room to be able to come together for inclusion purposes, to be able to have teachers to come together, to have all of their classrooms out in the family rooms at a time to do some unique learning opportunities for all students. So that's how we're going to age group them at this point in time. Again, Dr. Dodge and the SAC and Gail Fedoranco's, Miranda will be up at the front of the building, along with some itinerant staff and some conference room areas. We're also going to have our early on program at the front of the building. So that is our program for our birth to age 2 years, 9 months, 3 months, for our staff to be up front for easy access for our brand new families to come in as well. Those are the half classrooms up there. And then we also have itinerant staff really in those classrooms. So there's office space between classrooms, again, where parents can come in and view their students' learning. We have teacher desks in there for our paraprofessional staff, as well as our teaching staff and ancillary staff, so that they have a meeting space right where the classrooms are. We also have additional classrooms closer to, or additional itinerant staff closer to our GSRP classrooms, for our occupational therapists, our physical therapists, our speech and language therapists, of which we have many at Jackson. We also have designed a kitchen that is an amazing kitchen space with lots of storage for all of the snacks and the food that we prepare for our students. We have a demonstration kitchen for, our students as well, so that if Dr. Dodge wants to make some pancakes, that she's going to be able to do that with her littlest learners as well. The gross motor space, obviously you saw, is absolutely huge. We also have a smaller gross motor space for our occupational therapists and our physical therapists to be able to pull small groups of students or individual students for that therapy as well, with big roll-up door, if I'm correct, to be able to go right out into the playground area. So you're going to have that indoor-outdoor space for students on those beautiful days like we've had in the past. Large enough walkways for Ann Cox to be able to push large strollers through the hallways for our students. And then all along the hallways, have you have...
Is it going to be the Ann Cox hallway?
It is. Yep, sorry, you're in my line of view. So all along the hallways too, being very cognizant of the students that we have and making sure that this is an all-inclusive early childhood center, that we have coloring walls for students. We also have braille walls for students and many other sensory opportunities for our students to be able to access as they're walking through those hallways. So it is just absolutely an amazing early childhood center, again, with a lot of input from Dr. Dodge and many tours of other early childhood centers that we went through. We picked the best pieces of all of those centers that we saw. Thank you to you guys for hearing us out and listening to us, and I hope our Jackson friends who are here right now are excited about what they've seen.
Thank you. I think that was helpful because really the budget is certainly an important element, and you're going to see that the budget has grown. So before we get to that point, I know we have a couple of questions, but what we really did was take a space that we currently have and really grow the opportunities for our students and staff to utilize those resources in a way that we think will really serve our community. But I know we had a few more questions.
I think we had Liz first. Go ahead.
Thank you. I'm concerned about the secure entrance that we have in all of our other schools. Is that going to be implemented in this building? It looks like those mudroom entrances are those going to be open all day, or will visitors and parents and anyone else be directed to the main entrance?
The front that you were shown is a secure vestibule. So the only way to get into the front, if a visitor came, would be the same as all of our other buildings. You walk into the secure vestibule, and you have to be buzzed into the Welcome Center, which would be to the left. I could get through that secure vestibule because I have my badge or I have my keys, but anybody else would have to be buzzed into the building. All of the other parent entrances are also secured, and because we do things with our scheduling system, we will be able to control those spaces and those doors. So based upon the timing of when students are there, much like we do at our buildings now, we have a timer. For example, LCTC has 3 unique times during the day that students come: the 1-2 block, the 3-4 block, and the 4-5 block. We have that timed out so that it does unlock at that point in time, so students could get in, and then it automatically locks again. So we have it all scheduled out. We've worked, there's actually an individual door hardware meeting that went on for quite some time that everyone was thrilled to be at to discuss just this topic.
So those
Also do key code
mudroom
access for parents. We wanted to do that.
We are having conversations about how we do and do not want to do certain things. We're in continued discussions.
So the mudroom doors then would be mostly for drop-off and pickup?
Yes, that is correct.
Thank you.
Great. Other questions? Yes.
Yes,
Barbara.
Mrs. Oquist, you and I spoke briefly about the number of children that we can service in Jackson currently and that we anticipate being able to service in the new facility. So can you share some of the thoughts on that?
I, off the top of my head, cannot.
Oh, okay.
But what I can tell you is what we are looking at are the programs that we have offered within Jackson Center currently. We're also looking to house our GSRP program, which is currently housed at Garfield community school. And so those students and programs would be coming over as part of our early childhood offerings. So we will continue to have our early childhood offerings and also add our GSRP. We can get you specific numbers for the
Okay.
programs, but what we wanted to do was leave some amount of growth capacity in this design. And this design does have a couple of classrooms that are unassigned, potentially unassigned, so that we have the opportunity to continue to grow as we have the staffing to be able to do so.
Okay. And that was part, and staffing, I know, is part of it. And as you and I had discussed, it's not
Yes.
just a matter of having the physical square footage.
Right.
But staffing is difficult to come by, especially for our littler learners.
Yes.
We have to have a higher ratio, I know, of staff
Yes.
to students as we do, much different
Yeah.
than we would in an elementary setting. But I know there's always a waiting list to get into Jackson. So it's nice if we can do anything to alleviate part of that.
Sure.
And like I said, I know it's not just a square footage issue, it's a staff issue.
It is, it's a complex piece, and that's something that our team will continue to work closely with the Jackson team to determine what we feel we can confidently staff to begin, and then where we can grow from there.
Okay.
Francis, you
Yes,
wanna-
if I may, just to piggyback on that, while Mrs. Oquist mentioned that it currently has a couple of classrooms, that we have some space as it would be configured and finished to have growth, it's also been positioned in such a manner on the property itself that future boards can decide if it's needed to expand out further on the property that we have. So we've got short-term potential for growth and capability, and we have long-term capability for growth as well.
All righty, thank you.
Brian, did you want to say something? No. Got it. All right, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Senator. It's just a comment. Looking at the design and the way it sort of branches out, it can be a little bit confusing to people for the first time. So I really like the fact that it's going to be color-coded. So all you need is the color, and you can find your color, and you can get in. I think that was a great idea to do that. And I think
And
it's
that
gonna-
driveway actually loops all the way around the building, so you don't go to the back, turn, and have to push your way back through again. You can actually just loop the whole building depending on which program your child's in, and you can park
Find your
near
color.
that color. Mhm.
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, that's great. Mrs. Byrne.
There's the playground, obviously, we saw in the front. Is there also going to be playground in the back or not? Because that building kind of works diagonally across the property.
All in the front, along that
All in the
diagonal
front area, okay.
And again, parents drop off on the north side, kids go into the mudroom, then into their
Okay.
class areas, and then from the mudroom, they can go
Gotcha.
directly out to the play area. So it's a good sequence without any traffic.
Okay, so what I'm thinking of is if I'm standing on the south side of the building, I'm used to being on that side where the existing parking lot for Dickinson is right now. In essence, they're dropping off on the opposite side of the
They're
building.
on
and we're in
they're on the other side,
it.
and the
Okay.
playground is on the south side, and that's the sunny side of the building as well, which again
Gotcha.
is great for that.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. I wanted to just mention one thing. There's really no corridors in this building. I mean, you're really walking through the mudroom or a family room and to gain, and I think that was deliberate, so that it isn't just a series of hallways that aren't really used.
Yes.
Everything is a usable space within the interior of the facility.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right, any other questions or comments? I think Mr. Weber, are you going to kind of go into the budget stuff?
Yep.
Or okay.
I don't know if we can put.
I think we still have we need to put the presentation back on. We've got some more slides in there.
Oh, great.
There's no music this time, though, unfortunately. Yeah. There we go. So the budget that's been mentioned a few times, as Phil mentioned, this was the initial thought process when the bond program started with a budget, evolved many times throughout. Understanding we wanted to do what was right for the community, so we captured that early on. This was not a recent surprise to us. The square footage grew, so we've been working over the last few months, similar to what we had to work through with the robotics program, understanding not only did the size grow, cost of construction, the economy's a heck of a different world than we knew when we were first budgeting this bond program. So we've put lists together multiple times, met as our bond team with leadership to understand that, hey, this is coming, we don't want to not have a plan. So our initial budget was $15 million. We have a DD design that came in at $29.8 million. Looking at that, over the past few weeks, we've met with the construction manager, Clark, TMP. We put together about 35 different items, some of that stuff that you can see, some stuff you can't see from a structure, but understanding we can't accept as is. Is there any opportunity to get more efficient, construct it a different way, look at some of the architectural features? Do we need those? Do we need other structural things that we can look at? Of those items, we probably accepted about half of them, but we were we captured about $1.8 million. We knew we were not getting back down to budget. We did not want to strip all the character out of this building. We made the decision early that we were using that footprint, so let's not just build a footprint that doesn't have the character, the needs of the community. So we've been working not only to adjust budget, do scope containment with the other projects, being very mindful of how we're designing those. We've also considered other outside funding sources that we potentially have to look to depending on where other bids come in. That can be part of the capital fund. Sinking funds have been discussed. There's ESSER funds out there. So there's been numerous financial options that we've considered, not hammered down an exact one yet, which will be very dependent on where we get at our bid time on this project. And then I'll share some news on our next agenda item that there's a lot of factors at play that we can't just nail this down to a specific number depending on where we come in at a bid day. So it has been a consideration since the programming phase that we've been planning for this day to make sure we have the funds available.
On to the next slide.
Very high-level schedule, just to keep everybody up to speed on how we're going to march through this. So we've been designing for almost a year now, I believe, close to. So you will see us again in, I take it back, we're going to finish up design. Construction drawings are due at the end of this month. Then TMP will submit those to the state for plan review to get that process going. And then we'll be bidding this out at the end of November through December. We'll have a post-bid interview process that rolls through the mid-January. And then you'll see us again in January to present a recommendation for the contractors for this project. From there, we're trying to hit the ground running, start in the spring as soon as weather allows. So spring of '23, we'll roll through that full year, turn the corner for the summer of '24, and look to turn the facility over to the district in the summer of '24 in preparation for that fall semester of '24.
Questions about timeline or cost? People will be very happy to see the summer 2023 bid package after seeing the overages on this one. Doesn't quite make up for it, but
Little by little.
little by little, yeah.
Mr. Centers?
Yeah.
I have one other question. From our initial concept of this building, when we first began our budgeting, we've chosen to expand the size of the building since then also, correct?
Yes, we have. So if we looked at a similar size school to Jackson, we would have been about 30,000 square feet smaller.
Okay.
What we realized is we would not have been able to include the programming that overall collectively we thought was important to include
Right.
to be a comprehensive early childhood center. So this is not a matter of throwing caution to the wind and simply exceeding initial budgetary costs. We went with a square footage cost at that time for a school that would be of similar size to that Jackson is currently. Clearly, we've added scope to that,
Right.
both in the gross motor room as well as the GSRP classrooms, and just really expanding the space so there is sufficient space for all of the itinerant and support staff that support the children of Jackson. So we continue to get feedback about where we're currently finding a shortfall in space and added that too. In addition, as you know, just the pressures within the construction realm, have seen some significant increases in inflation over the past year. So really, there's a combination where our initial projections when we first thought about design was based on a square footage cost that is now far beyond that, but also our scope at our request has grown considerably, but we feel it is appropriate to look at that now rather than build a space that would be considerably smaller with the intent of building on at a later date. The cost would be more significant at that point in time, and anytime you come back to a project and start again, you're bringing a new team back out and you're losing some economies of scale. And so while the variance looks significant, the project itself has grown considerably. So I know Mrs. Smith has joined us, and I'd like to give her a chance to speak to that.
Thank you. We have been discussing this at each of our bond planning meetings, looking at all the different funding sources available to us. And we definitely have some sinking funds available that we can use towards the site costs, getting the site ready for the building. So we're planning to do that. We've also been very fortunate in getting 2 rounds of the child care stabilization grant. And so we've been able to offset some of our general fund costs and been able to put some money away towards our capital projects fund. So we can tap into those funds to help round out the budget for this project. So we do feel very confident with these different sources that this is definitely a good plan for us and smart to move forward with it.
And I don't know if we mentioned owner's contingency as well. I know that Brian and PMC have worked through our owner's contingency throughout this program to also look at using some of those dollars for just such this, is why we have those contingency dollars.
All right, anything else? Well, I think this will be a jewel not only for the district, but the community as a whole. It's really spectacular, and it's going to be just an amazing space for these kids. So thank you so much for being here and presenting this today. It's a really exciting day for us all.
Can't wait.
Good seeing you.
Thank you very much,
Thank you
Melanie.
very
Thank you,
much.
John, for coming in and presenting.
Sure.
Thank you, everyone, for coming.
Thank you for joining us.
Thanks to our Jackson friends. Yeah.
All right, that will lead us to item 3B, which is summer 2023 bond renovation bid package for the 2021 bond. Mr. Francis and Mr. Weber will go through these with us.
Yes, thank you very much. So we turn our attention now towards the summertime of 2023, the renovations in our buildings, as well as air conditioning upgrades in some of our other buildings. So this coming summer, we do have 5 getting fully renovated. We are talking about Cleveland and Rosedale K-4 elementaries, Riley Upper Elementary, Frost Middle School, and Franklin High School. So as we've talked about in the past, and I know the board knows this, but I'll throw it out just in case somebody's tuning in for the first time, the overall renovations, the 2 real big items are the full renovation of LMCs, those library media centers, the kitchens, which are running as original equipment since whether the 50s or 60s the building was built. We're doing toilet rooms, doors, hardware, and then in each building they may have their own one-off or two-offs as we would walk the building with the principal and some of their folks to say what's been going on in this building that you see over the past several years that you would say is a concern or a need, and then we take those into consideration as well. So those 5 buildings, summer of '23, and then on top of that, to add the air conditioning units into Roosevelt, Webster, and Stevenson High School in the summer of '23 also. So that's the overall package of buildings, and we put out for bid for the summer '23 project. The full package, we are, and I think Mr. Centers alluded to this, are pleased to know that our base bids came in under our budget, and we also had the ability, and we did create alternate bids purposefully, not because we didn't want to do those projects, but we wanted to be able to make sure that the board had wiggle room, if you will, in the budget. We weren't 100% certain how the bids were going to come in. They came in favorably from our point of view, and that allowed us to be able to accept all the alternates that we had put out. And as an example, we'll go through some, but as an example, something like at Frost Middle School during the 2013 bond, we did not replace their ceiling grids and lights in their hallways. So that was something that we put on as an alternate. And we have a handful of other items in the different buildings. So we're very fortunate. We feel fortunate. I know it's still a lot of money. We're going to talk about $23 million worth of work, that including the contingency and whatnot. But that is still something that we're we're very happy to have seen come in. So I'll turn it over to Brian. He can run through a couple of items, and we can answer any questions you might have.
Brian, before you get started, I just want to say that this is something you will probably touch on during your presentation, but we see areas in the market where there are a number of people looking for work. There's a number of bids, and then there's places where we've seen over and over that it's difficult to get bids, and that's the case in this as well. Despite that, though, the numbers came in good, even in areas where we didn't get a lot of bidders. I think we're excited to see the numbers all together, so go ahead.
Yeah, I can touch on that, and then we'll get to it, but it's not only, we're not always looking for quantity. We want the quantity to have competitiveness. We have quality vendors that have bid this project that we know, that have been in the district or have worked with Clark or Cressa. So I'll touch on that when we get through.
Thanks.
So try not to bore everybody as we get through our typical letter, but this was a trade contractor package, so it was a publicly bid, publicly advertised package. It not only went in the local newspaper, went to the Sigma, the state website. We also promoted it to a number of plan rooms, construction plan rooms, just to promote it more, knowing it is still a busy market right now, and maybe not everybody has the capacity. We wanted to reach out as much as possible, so we went out of our way to do that. And then on top of that, Plant Moran Crescent also found other bid results from our other districts we're working in, gave those contractors, the list of those contractors to Clark so they could reach out to them as well, just to promote as much as possible for this program. So walking through the process of the bidding in early October 5th, we did post those documents, received bids from 45 different contractors on October 25th. And then for the next few days, did our typical post-bid interviews, make sure the low bidder was a responsible low bidder, did they have all the scope. I believe there was one bid category that is highlighted. It was significantly lower than other bidders. It was one of the carpentry packages. We found out there was a large gap that they did not have the doors and hardware, so it was not a complete bid. We ended up taking the second low bidder for that. But everybody else, our low bids did vet out, and we were able to capture all the low bids, which is a good thing. Touch and base, I just note that we do have alternates we'll roll through. There was a total of 15 at the end of the day. And then, like Phil had mentioned, we'll be recommending $23,554,369 at the end of the day here, so.
And that's inclusive of fees and contingency.
That is correct.
And we were able, we worked through and thought about the contingency from the summer of '22, which was a 9% contingency going into that first year. We were unsure of how it would come out, and we actually did quite well from the standpoint of contingency. And we'll be bringing back
$1.5 million.
$1.5 million back into the bond budget from the 2022 contingency. So we dropped that down to the traditional 7% as opposed to 9%. So that $23,554,369 is inclusive of all items.
Yep. And if you flip to page 3, there is our typical breakout of what our hard construction was. The actual was $21,193,000. So we had a variance to the good of $1.79 million. Into the second category is our staffing and reimbursables are in Clark's base contract. We just wanted to note that. And then on the left, it notes the general conditions and CM fees at 2%, just a multiplier of actual work for another savings of the $42,000, just as that multiplier. Roll into the contingency, and Phil noted that we're down to 7%, which is also typical of where we're at in the 13 bond, for another savings of a realized savings of $125,000. So at the bottom right, the variance of 1.961 is a savings that can get moved into our owner contingency. Like Mr. Centers had mentioned, that helps us offset some of the costs from the last presentation. So combined with that 1.9 and the 1.5 that we're expecting back from unused contingency in '23, we're looking at a little bit of about $3.5 million going right back into owner contingency to help us on the owner overages. So it is.
So I'm going to pause there for a moment because that's pretty significant. When you remember when we were at this point last year and taking a look at those bids, they were significant, and we saw some great escalation in the costs. And so one of the things I really want to emphasize is to be at this point and be, almost $2 million under budget coming in on a project this size is significant. We did not expect this, and so this is the result of some pretty aggressive marketing on this work, and having, a careful review of these vendors, as well as being very conscious of the scope that we were including in these projects. So we feel that we are certainly meeting the obligations that we identified for our community that we would with this bond. But knowing where the costs are, we were, obviously also made a very concerted effort to be sure that we were sticking within those parameters for each of these projects. So we're very pleased to bring this information to you this evening.
I think part of it, we have, whether it affected the budget or not, we have several large vendors and companies that worked on our buildings in '22 who rebid. So a couple of things there. One, they know the job, they know the work, they understand the timeline, they understand the amount of work and the size of the crews that they're gonna need. And two, they wanna work with LPS. They wanna come back, they wanna do it again. So they came back and bid, and many of them were low responsible bidders as well.
That's correct. And if you want to turn to page 5, so 2 more pages. I won't go through every one, but just to touch on some of the larger ones, and like Phil had mentioned, there is a lot of repeat bidders here, which is good news. We're able to leverage that for the teams that we had last year, keep them on board, not only to get a good head start, they already know the program, but also help close out some of the other 22 projects. If you remember, it was a known that we were waiting on electrical gear just based on the market right now and supply chain. That gear is now starting to arrive, which pushes us into the spring months for that base contract, which was planned. Well, now we have the same contractors there, that we don't have 2 crews, we have 1 crew in the district that can efficiently get to all those projects. So it is a good thing that we're seeing some of the same trades back out here from that standpoint as well. Just highlighting some of these, Blue Star Demolition has been in the district multiple times, was also in the district last year. I'd want to note, concrete was a single bidder. This is more of a, we had to rebid this last year, if you remember. It's not an attractive piece of work just based on the volume of it and the nature of it. We knew that going in. We did reach out to multiple firms. It's just a matter of this, along with a couple other smaller packages. It's just a really busy time right now, and not to beat the thing to death, but we're trying, and we're going to continue learning. Cressa and Clark are actually going to meet later this week, discuss other options, and continue not to accept it as a standard. We're going to try and figure out how to keep getting more players on the table just to keep the competitive bid going. So we are working through that one. I won't bore everybody with a top to bottom list, but J.D. Candler Roofing, well known in the district. Turner Brooks, the carpenter, did get both packages this time. They did have one last year. They're a very large firm. They should be able to handle that from a carpentry standpoint. We have the same painter, same tile company. Same kitchen equipment, Stafford Smith, who we were using last year, has done well for us. We do have a different plumber this year. There was 2 new low bidders, well known in the industry. We had 2 and 3 bids for the plumbing package, so we felt comfortable who did respond to that. And then rolling into the last of it with the HVAC and electrical, you do see Conti LLC, very large firm in the area, performed well for us last year on the bond program. And you can see at the very last line item, because they did pick up all 5 packages, the 3 HVAC and 2 electrical, they did offer a deduct in their bid for efficiencies for managing the project. So we do get a $107,000 credit back for securing them on all 5 of those packages. Does anybody have questions on any specific bidders? All right. 2 pages in, I want to touch base on bid alternates.
Can go to the alternates? Yeah. We've got several alternates on here, as you had heard, and it's worth just kind of running through to give you a sense of what those jobs are, just to kind of put everybody on the same page. Because sometimes just reading the sheets that you have don't necessarily tell you what exactly is going on there, right? So we can run through those, and we'll go building by building, starting with Cleveland. You want me to go?
Go ahead, and I can jump in.
Okay, so the first one you have, alternate 1 at Cleveland, is the art classroom. And this is really getting the casework and some updates in that room. During the 13 bond, we did not have that work done. So it's a little bit of reconfigure and update on that. So The majority of the work there is based upon the flooring and the casework, and then you see some plumbing because in the art room we have the requirement for the water. Yeah,
And
exactly.
This also gets all of the specials in one wing.
Yep, and this, yes, and this will move this over to, I was thinking of, apologize, that was Rosedale I was thinking of. Thank you. We are switching over. That is, yeah, I completely was thinking of Rosedale. Yeah, no, there's only 15 of them. We're actually moving, this art room at Cleveland is in a wing of traditional elementary classrooms, and all the other special classrooms are in another wing together. By swapping out the classroom for the art room, which is what we're doing here, that will now put all of the specials all in the same area. It's really an appropriate and smart move that the principal had requested. And so it's not for nothing just to make a switch. It really makes some sense to have all the specials in that same area. Apologies on that, and thank you for very gently telling me I was thinking of a different building. Alternate 2 is the gym storage area at Cleveland. We're still over at Cleveland. If you are familiar at all with the way their gymnasium cafeteria is set up, you have the gym, and then when you move next door, it was actually blocked off several years ago to become like a meeting space or a collaboration space. And then moving beyond again, suddenly now becomes the gymnasium's storage facility and where the teacher has an office space. So it's really kind of a mishmash of spaces. We're gonna flip those. So the storage and the teacher space is actually right next to and contiguous with the gymnasium. And then we'll turn that back side, which was storage, into a space that the staff can use to meet and make that look like a collaboration area. So it just becomes more of a usable, wiser utilization of the space as opposed to walking through a room to get to the room you need to be in. Also at Cleveland, alternate number 3 is the casework in the workroom. This is between the two kindergarten rooms, right? So, and this is, Rosedale and Cleveland are very similar buildings, and they have some of the same things going on. And you'll see this again at Rosedale, where in their kindergarten classrooms, they share a large storage area. We really want to go into that space and help clean up. The teachers, of course, have to clean up the actual materials, but we're going to help them with a little bit better storage layout for their items so they can just sort of, yes, utilize that space better. It's a shared space for their working areas and for their storage. So it's really not a big item to accomplish since we have workers there. It's easier just to take care of it while we're there. Moving on to your next page, number 4 alternate, now we're at Rosedale. The staff lounge at Rosedale can't fit the staff. And so this has been something that is a known, and we have the ability now, and this was why it was an alternate. We wanted to say, look, this is something we can either look at, either do or reject. And there's a room next to it that isn't being utilized fully, so we can take down the wall at the staff room, enlarging it, and now they can actually have the entire staff for a meeting or for gatherings or just to utilize in the normal fashion that you would think that a staff room would work. At Rosedale, number 5, we have the art classroom. I already described this earlier when we were in Cleveland. It's casework, we're utilizing it. There's a big island that we have to work on. There's plumbing in there, and there's the vast majority of this is simply the new casework. You can see the $23,000 on the casework itself to really make it a more efficient space for the students as well as the teacher when she's teaching or he is teaching. Number 6 alternate is casework in the workroom. This is the same description I just had at Cleveland with regard to the kindergarten room. It's an identical situation. We'll move on to Riley, alternate number 7. This is the casework in multiple classrooms. These are the old science rooms. Right? So Riley, take you on a little historical journey that we all remember, is when we moved Riley from a middle school to an upper elementary school. It being built as originally an old junior high, a middle school, it had these science-type rooms with the large, cabinetry, the black countertops, gas lines, plumbing, faucets, etc. It is also there. While it's been cut and capped and abandoned with regard to the gas and regard to the faucets, it still exists in the room. It wasn't something that we could tackle in the 2013 bond. We wanted to be able to tackle it in this bond. We made an alternate, again, just in case, but the real desire of the entire team and Riley was to bring those classrooms, update them, take out that science lab, that junior high science lab look, get rid of those faucets, et cetera, clean up that area, and restore it to just a traditional 5th or 6th grade classroom. So we feel able to accomplish that. And again, the very much the lion's share of this is casework, because we're talking about multiple classrooms and putting the casework back in there with countertops.
So I'm going to hop in on this one. This is one of those items that very appropriately was bid as an alternate, but really we felt that at this point in time, if it wasn't something we did now, when would we do that? So we really were conscious of our costs during the 2013 bond as we are with this one. So it was one of those areas where we did do the cut and cap. We did do some other updates in those classrooms and flooring and ceiling and HVAC and all of those additions, new furniture. But as you look at those classrooms, they still had that dated look of the old science classrooms. And so it really feels appropriate that we are outfitting those to be like all of our other upper elementary classrooms, have the casework and the utilization that the other classrooms in the school have. So it really seems like this is the right time, because if we didn't do it in the last bond and we didn't do it in this one, the likelihood of us being able to come back and do that again was probably slim to none.
Alternate number 8, we're now at Riley still, and we have the alternate number 8 is there's a curriculum, workroom, storage room space between classrooms, and again, you see the remnants of its history. There's a couple of smaller offices with sinks and fire suppressant items, and we believe I believe Mr. Lau said we do have some asbestos in those spaces. So we want to just simply do this as a $16,500 alternate to abate that area, remove the remnants of being like the cleanup area for the science rooms, and give them a genuine curriculum, storage, and workspace. It's not a very large, this isn't a whole classroom. It's a smaller office space with 2 smaller rooms inside of them that they utilize in that fashion. And they have books, shelving, et cetera in there. And right now, you can see it just isn't quite right. And we would, whenever we can have the opportunity to abate areas, we do like to do that. And at Riley, the bottom one there on that same page 12, alternate number 9, this is the media center. So if those of you familiar with the Riley LMC, you know that it is a landlocked space. It is on the interior of the building without any exterior walls. There was some discussion of, how, do we put some windows in a wall for simply bringing lighting in? Well, the reality is it's a large space. We're going to have new lighting, LED. It will be bright. But when you look at it now, and I know this board's familiar because our board meetings a couple of summers ago were in there, and you could see there's just a long wall with bookshelves and books on it. In order to break that up, we did put in this alternate for windows periodically on that wall to sort of break up the wall. Yes, give a little visual in from the hallway and out to the hallway. Yes, some more light will come in, but it's not natural light, but it's more of an updated feel and look to this space that's going to be completely renovated. Instead of having that long wall of shelving again, we took this at $16,000 to add just some window lights throughout that long wall. So it's really a way to bring in a little bit more brightness and to have students who are in the hall be able to see, hey, look what's going on in the library, and when you're in the library, to give it that better aesthetic feel so it's not just one long run. And then finally, we move on to, we have Frost. We have, this is a big, this is a large item, $208,600, but this is the entirety of the hall having the grid done. I had mentioned this earlier. It was not done originally. Literally, there's duct tape in spaces on their ceiling in the hallway holding up some of the the grids that hold the panels up. So we want to make sure that that's not an appropriate look for our schools. And it'll have updated LED lighting as well. And then alternate 12, we have not accepted 11 because 11 was just another alternate from the ceiling grid. We had 2 ideas in there. So we always knew that it was either one or the other. And alternate 12, we have some countertops in the foods room, the cooking room, foods room. There's the laminate countertops they have that have been there quite a while. We've got some cracking, some breaking, some peeling off of that. So we're looking to come in with some new countertops on this one. And a very similar item, when we move into Franklin, you can see the home economics number 13, room E109, same setting as what we just talked about in the foods room at Frost. And now finally at Franklin, we have one of their offices. No, wait, we have the art class. And boy, oh boy, I keep thinking I'm done. This is good heavens. Yes, I want to, anticipation is killing us all here. So we do have the art classroom, and actually, I should have remembered this. We were just walking it the other day, late last week. So we have the art room at Franklin. There's a kiln room that's in there, and we also have the casework area. So we are looking to do some of the casework there on the alternate that you see, number 14. And I will give you a note that the large number, the $37,000, is for the replacement of the sinks. We really don't need to have them replaced. So our intention actually would be to accept this and then get the deduct for those sinks, because the sinks are actually in good shape. All they really need is a couple of faucets reworked. And then moving to the next piece there, this is also the art room and the kiln room that I mentioned. We are going to be putting coming through the masonry wall and adding an exterior door. It's not, it would be for emergency exit only. It's not for normal egress, and there wouldn't be a card reader or anything on their other side. These 2 art classrooms that are connected do have egress windows, but the door through the kiln room would really be a much more appropriate egress if needed in case of fire and anything else, as opposed to, because the egress windows is pretty high up actually in those classrooms. So it would just be another way out from that. The art teacher actually thought of it, and when we looked at it and the architects took a peek at it, and we started to look at that classroom and the other that's also connected to it, we thought, especially for the dollars that it came in, this is a pretty smart move for us to have a new egress for them through a door.
Well, I know the kilns are safe, but somewhere that you have intense amount of heat, having an easy way to get out does seem to make a lot of sense, yeah.
And then finally, and I swear this time alternate 16 is finally it, is the scheduling office actually at Franklin High School. We are looking to do a little bit of work in there. The cabinetry, the casework, the file cabinets that are in there are from the 1990s. They are the, not the particle board type of casework, and we're going to be replacing some of those. There's some flooring. We'll have to do some patching in some walls and some paint, etc. So really just giving it an updated feel and look in that scheduling office.
This was not done.
And it was not done in the last one. No.
Okay.
No.
Just a question, Phil, going back to the kiln room with the egress door, that's just supposed to be an emergency door, correct?
Correct.
But someone can just push on the door and open it?
Correct.
Is there any kind of a sound or a bell or an alarm?
We
if
did
that
not
door is
intend to
open?
have it as an alarm door. What I was meaning by it would be only for emergency, in that on the exterior, we are not going to core out a key. We're not going to put a card reader on it. It's not supposed to be a natural ingress, egress. It really would be meant for emergency, but there's times where the teacher, we don't want an alarm, because talking to the teacher, he said there are times when they work on some items where they do step outside and spray. So it makes more sense, instead of walking all the way around, out the hall, down the side and outside, they now can go through it as long as the teacher obviously lets them back in. But what we didn't want to become is somebody's personal entrance in, so we're not going to be coring the exterior, if that makes sense.
Okay. You know, I was just thinking from a security standpoint,
So,
being able to open, somebody could open that door and let somebody in, and somebody might not know about it. That's the only concern that I had.
Well, that could happen in, we have many classrooms with many
That's
doors
the
that go to
other-
the exterior.
that's the downside,
That would
yeah.
be,
Right.
yeah, that, we have
We'd
frankly
have to-
many.
We have to do every door.
Yeah, yeah. I think the utilization of it for the teacher, the way he described what he was going to do sometimes, makes sense to allow them to go outside and let those students back in versus alarming it and having it literally only be for emergency. So it would get utilized better, yet we all feel better that we have that door that if it was a fire drill, they could go through.
Great. Mrs. Byrne?
The countertops that you're replacing in a few of the home ec rooms, what, are those going to be
They're
laminate?
laminate now, okay? And we called for a solid surface in this alternate bid. We've looked more closely at that for the cost of the solid surface. We've already had discussion about getting Deduct to come back with laminate again, and then we either can take that savings or use the savings in other areas of the room if we feel like we want to update something else. So it's not, it's always nice to have the solid surface in those spaces. The concern would be generally longevity of solid surface is longer than laminate. However, we may need to do more work in these rooms because they are still the original cabinetry in both Franklin and Frost. Very similarly, if we ever wanted to come back and do something to those cabinets, i.e. replace the casework, now we're taking out brand new solid surface that we paid a premium for at this point, whereas we can really either reband or fully relaminate, save quite a bit of money. At Frost, we think it's around $20,000, and even if we wanted to just to capture that savings or turn around and maybe paint those cabinets or something like that, we could have that funding. So the idea between accepting this is we have the number, let's take it, and then it leaves us with options of where we want to go.
All right, great. Anyone
We
else?
did actually have quite a bit of discussion on that.
Yeah, that was long.
On that item, and
Yeah.
we really feel for both short and long-term, it's the right call to go with the laminate. It'll be updated, it'll be fresh, it'll be new, but it won't be such an investment that if we wanted to come back and do new casework in 6 or 7 or 8 years,
Right.
we would hesitate to do so because now
Right.
we've
Right.
really had that expense put into a solid surface countertop.
Yep.
So we think it's the right way to go.
And for a school setting, I mean, I agree with you, with this, for a
Yeah.
school setting, there are a lot of laminates out there that look darn close to a solid surface, even though they may not be.
Yeah.
But it
And
is a
it'll be
significant
fresh and
savings.
new and clean and solid.
Yep.
But, and we also think appropriately cost-effective.
Yep, thank you.
It's amazing how on each of those little items, there's a lot of
Oh,
small
they're, yeah.
pieces and a lot of big pieces, but
Yeah.
a lot of discussion has taken place on each one of
A
these.
lot of them.
Each one of these.
Yeah, I felt like Columbo for a moment there. Just one more thing, ma'am.
Exactly.
I'm like a grandpa over here.
Yeah.
I'd like to
Rob.
chime in just a little bit more, and no, there's no more pages alternates, but kind of more perspective of the good news. So not only the money, but if you remember the last time we presented for the 22 summer, we were in January, February. We did have that later design period. Here we are in November. So one, thank you for letting us do a special vote after this. It's going to help enormously. There's 3 weeks in between. That 3 weeks means the world to us from a procurement standpoint. We've already had discussions verbally with get shop drawings ready, product data ready for our longer lead items, for our air conditioning units, for food service equipment, for electrical gear. We can expedite that process. So, like I said, not only from funding, from a schedule standpoint, we're sitting a lot better from the get-go on this round of work. So it's good news all around right now. So just want to capture that perspective. where we're at right
And the
now.
ball continues to move with regard to pushing it forward. We're going to start then when we come back from the holidays and start on 24.
Great. Mrs. Byrne?
Mr. Centers, as I have in other construction pieces, I am not certain in this case whether or not my family's company has bid to any company that's listed on this document. So out of an abundance of caution, I am going to refrain from voting on this.
Great, thank you. Any other questions or comments? All right, it's good to bring some good news. Yeah, appreciate it,
We're
Chris.
excited and you know, talked to a couple of the principals and said, hey, we're doing the alternate. We want to recommend those to the board, and they were excited for that as well. It's always nice to know that your building's going to get some freshened up. So this would be, this entire package is going to be the one item in the special meeting. That's following this.
Mr. Weber, are you staying with us for items C and D?
Do you want to stay? I don't know. You want to go home, don't you?
No, it doesn't. What are we talking about?
You can go home.
We got greenhouse and stormwater
You know.
management.
You know,
That's information.
All right, thank you, Mr. Weber.
Thank you,
Appreciate you for being here. All right, that brings us to item 3C, which is the Garfield Greenhouse site work. Mr. Francis.
Thank you very much. So it is not deja vu. It is something that we've talked about repeatedly, and that's sort of the thrust of what I want to discuss with you on this. As you know, at one point, which feels like a very long time ago, we brought forward a recommendation for a site work company, Universal Consolidated Enterprise, and we were going to have that site work done, prepared so that eventually Grossband could come in and set and build the greenhouse that we've been holding in the warehouse for quite some time. And they unfortunately went out of business, and this was a while back. And then we bid it again, and we didn't get anybody to bid it. And then we bid it again, and we weren't getting anybody. So in the end, what we've done is we reached out to a couple of companies that we've worked with in the past, asked for quotes, worked with Mrs. Smith in the finance department, and said, we know that we've done, on behalf of the board, the due diligence, but we have to do this project. And I cannot answer the most low-hanging fruit question of, if we could get a couple of quotes, why didn't they bid? I don't know how to answer that. Now, Nagel was one of the quotes, and they did bid originally. They actually were much higher on their original bid back in that first time. And while they still are not the low quote on this, their number came down, and we would be recommending Simone Companies out of Shelby Township in the amount of $226,900 with their quote for the project. We really, this is as you all know, a partnership with Healthy Livonia, the city of Livonia. We've been holding on to this greenhouse that we purchased quite some time ago. And I'm on the threads from Grossband. When do you want us to come? When are we gonna build that? And we have to keep putting them off and saying, we don't have a foundation yet. So we actually are quite excited. I know Dr. Terrial has been working very hard with Mr. Lau, trying to say, we need to push this forward, we need to push this forward. And working with finance department, and we worked with Mr. Lau and said, if you can get quotes on this, let's just move forward. Yeah, we've done 3 times over our due diligence on this. So we do want to recommend this. This isn't in the special meeting, this would be just on the regular meeting. But we have worked with Simone Companies in the past. They worked in the 2013 bond in LPS. They're actually over at LCTC right now for this bond. So they are familiar with us, and we are familiar with them. And we want to explain that that this is going to be out of Act 18 for this cost, even though overall this project, we've talked about that partnership. We do have dollars from Health of Livonia, but those dollars are going to be placed elsewhere. The Act 18 budget is what has had these dollars set aside for this specific thing.
Great. Mr. Francis, can you tell us about a potential timeline for this?
I do not know if they're gonna be able to start.
Yeah.
This weather's actually been fascinating,
Yeah.
right? So.
But it's like 30s next week, I think, so,
Exactly,
yeah.
so as things turn, I don't know how long it's gonna take them to mobilize.
Yeah.
I can check in, I'll make note, and I'll check in on that
Okay.
for you.
Sounds good. Any other questions or comments? All
Glad
right.
it's getting done.
Yeah, that's
Yes,
right.
Absolutely.
So we'll see this on the next regular agenda then, right, Mr. Francis? Great.
On the 28th.
Yes.
Okay.
All right, so that brings us to item 3D, which is Stormwater Management Plan Resolution. Mr. Francis.
Thank you. This is something that is required of Livonia Public Schools. We have to put in that application and get our stormwater discharge by the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality. They administer that regulation, and we put in the application last spring. We've been working through the process with Arch Environmental, who we're all familiar with as being our environmental consultant. And the one last step to becoming renewed, because we did do this originally back in 16, early 16, and then we did get an extension on it, so it's usually every 5 years. So we had a little bit of an extension put on it, but we are required to reapply as we've done. The last thing that has to occur, and it is in your packet, is that the board would have to adopt the resolution that is in the packet. It's a resolution in support of stormwater management plan. The board doesn't make rules and regulations in this manner. What this is, your best way is to have these types of resolutions that we vote on, and then we can put that with the documentation of board approval, the final piece of the application packet to show that MDEQ, that we are on board with that. And then we say that these are the things that we will ensure. So the board is telling the administrative team and the staff to ensure that we follow these steps and these points for appropriate stormwater management. And if anybody's spent a few minutes talking to Mr. Lau about stormwater management, you know he is very serious about it. It just comes naturally to him. And so we have a department in the facilities and operations that really does take high priority with stormwater management. And all of the bond work that we do is a reason that we have, because we are disturbing, if you will, and then we have shed water into the Wayne County system, we're required to follow their rules. Mhm.
Any questions? Mrs. Burke.
So basically, this is just a resolution stating that the district, that the board approves this, and that the district acknowledges that there are rules that we have to follow, and we fully intend on following all of them.
Right.
Exactly.
Exactly. Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
We have to recertify that.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So then when they have that, the perfect way of saying recertify, saying like, okay, the board did their due diligence in this packet, and we attest that we will follow
That we will follow
this.
the rules. Okay.
Great. Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Sanders. Looking at the resolution, Phil, there's one whereas it says they agree to obtain construction site permits from the local municipality or other governing unit for new development. So I'm assuming we need to get one for the ECC.
We do, and we do that, we're doing work over at, anytime we do work anywhere that touches the stormwater, we're actually putting in the new water main over at LCTC as well. We do work with the local municipality. Oftentimes, it can be City of Livonia, sometimes it is County of Wayne, but we always do work through them, we get our approvals through them.
And permits and all that.
Mhm, 100%.
Great.
Great. Mrs. Byrne.
Is there going to need to be a retention pond at ECC? Or do we not know that yet?
I do
Because
not know
I
that.
know there is one at Stevenson that we were required to do
Right.
because of construction work we've been doing.
Yeah, generally, it does occur, I know we have one because we're further along with LCTC and robotics, there will be one there. It tends to be when you start digging in, that tends to, yeah, and there is water that runs through that area across Newburgh and through the Dickinson property. It's not exactly, yeah, it's not even really a babbling brook, but there is water under there, so we will follow whatever regulations and permits that we
Okay,
obtain.
okay. And in a situation like that, can we decide where we put a retaining pond? Just that we, or, I mean, if they determine that we must have one, do we get some discretion as to where it goes?
Within the realm of where we're told it can be. So for example, I'll use LCTC as an example. It had to be on to the east of the building on the large area that we have. You could have a couple of different options of how to do it, and we could push it a little bit east or a little bit west, but it needed to be there because it's flowing, it's the shedding of the water. So we have to put it in the appropriate spot
it's gonna
for the
naturally go.
watershed.
It's a relatively narrow variance from where they suggested. It's not that we can
Okay.
just pick a spot on the property and
Right.
select.
Yeah, we couldn't go north of it because it's shedding to the east.
Right,
Yeah.
gotcha, just 'cause it's prettier there.
It generally is, yeah. And it depends on what you're disturbing and not disturbing as far as the land. So,
Okay.
and that's all, that's why we have the engineers working on these. And that's why TMP is the one that brings the civil engineers, mechanical engineers for other things. But that's who will eventually work on and lay out all these pieces.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? All right, so would you like this on the regular agenda on the 28th?
Please.
Okay, thank you. That brings us to item 3E, which is SAC Furniture and Materials Child Care Stabilization Grant. And that's Ms. Smith. Thank you, Mr. Francis.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Good evening.
I'll be back later. Just one more thing now.
I'm happy to bring this recommendation for a purchase for some SAC furniture and materials for a few of our classrooms across the district. We've been very fortunate to have received 2 rounds of funding from the Child Care Stabilization Grant. Our first round of funding awarded us $1.4 million. That happened in the spring. And then we got a notice in June that we received round 2 of funding, which is another $1.5 million. So we've been able to utilize those dollars to offset some of our operating costs as well as make some program improvements. So with our spring grant, we were able to update some of the furniture across the district. And there was just a few sites that didn't get a chance to get some orders in. So we'd like to bring a recommendation for those sites tonight. The locations for this purchase are Riley, Cooper, Buchanan, Rosedale, and Cleveland. They found some items working with Lakeshore Learning through one of the cooperative purchasing arrangements. They're looking to purchase tables, chairs, storage units, classroom manipulatives, STEM mobile stations, light tables, area rugs, and book bins. And the total cost of the purchase would be just over $35,000. I had the opportunity to go look at a couple of the classrooms that had received items from this past spring, and they look beautiful. And you can just see the kids, you know, are going to love it. It adds some more pops of color into the classroom, and even just some of the new toys and games and whatnot, and some of the, like the light tables. I could definitely see why kids would be excited to go to our after-school childcare program. So that's a little bit about that grant. Because of the timeline of the grant, I'm hoping to put that onto our special meeting for later this evening.
Any questions, comments? Well, this is, yeah, it'd be something good for our students, and thank you for bringing it forward. So we'll put that on for this evening, if Mrs. Bradford, if you're good with that. Okay. All right, that concludes building and site. Thank you, Mrs. Smith.
All set? Okay, great. Next item on our agenda is item 4, Policy Committee, and I will turn it over to Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, President Burton. As exciting as all that building and site was, this is going to put it to shame. We have one item, Administrative Procedure DJE Purchasing, and Mrs. Smith.
Thank you. I'd like to bring a recommendation for an update to our administrative procedure on purchasing. This would be something that we wouldn't need board to take action on, but we obviously welcome your feedback. There's 2 changes I'm proposing based on an updated memo from the Michigan Department of Education. Every year they come up with the bid threshold above which we would have to go out to bid for purchases. They've just bumped that up from just over $26,000 to just over $28,000. So I'm recommending that we update our administrative procedure to now require amounts over $28,000 to be bid and then brought to the board for approval. The second change I'm proposing is also to award for those purchases that would require bidding and board approval. We currently have language in the administrative procedures that says that sealed bids will be received. When I had a conversation with our attorney, she pointed out that that was even more restrictive than what the law requires us. So in the law, it specifically doesn't use the word sealed, it uses the word competitive bids. So I'm proposing that we take the word sealed out and replace that with competitive. So anything over 28,000 will be awarded after the receipt of competitive bids, and then those items would be brought to the board for approval. Yes, so two rather straightforward things. I also did pull up the actual board policy, DJE, and that actually more closely aligns with the verbiage in DJE as well, which says, uses the word competitive again. That policy says, I'll skip the first line, it's the intent of the board that the school district purchase competitively from responsible vendors without prejudice or favoritism and seek maximum value for all expenditures. Competitive pricing is to be pursued by following legally required processes, as well as through such methods as cooperative purchasing, formal and informal bidding, requests for quotations from multiple vendors, and negotiation. So I do believe this tweak to the administrative procedures more closely aligns with our board policy as well.
Sounds good. Any
So if the
questions?
board's supportive of that, we'll adopt that and start using that.
Thank you for bringing that to us.
Yep, my pleasure, thank you. I did want to make note of one change that I'm not recommending and, seems to make sense to me. Right now, we do ask anybody making purchases that are going to be over $10,000 to seek out quotes for that. And that dollar amount hasn't changed for quite a long time, but in my opinion, $10,000 does seem like a pretty significant amount for a purchase. So I think that just shows our community that we are trying to find the best pricing for these purchases, and we do take that very seriously. And the minimum we can do is get a few quotes for purchases that rise to that level. So, wonderful.
All right.
Wonderful.
Thank you, Mrs. Smith.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And President Burton, that brings our very succinct policy to a close.
All
Thank you.
righty. Doesn't appear we have other items on our agenda, but we'll go down the list and check. Our Finance Committee, Mrs. Bonifield is not with us here this evening. Mrs. Acosta and Mrs. Oquist, I don't believe we have any items for finance.
We do not.
All righty. Curriculum, Mrs. Acosta?
I just wanted to give a quick shout out and thank you to Mr. Green, Mrs. O'Brien, and the teams over at Hayes, Hoover, and Randolph for the great presentation today with the PLTW team. Thank you.
Thank you for being there, and thank you to Mrs. Bradford for
It was
being there as
wonderful.
well. We were so happy you were able to join us.
All righty. Let me see here. Personnel, item 7, Mrs. Bradford.
We do not have anything tonight.
All righty, thank you. And item 8, legislative, Mrs. Jarvis?
Just a reminder that everyone take the time to go and vote.
Excellent. We'll be happy when this is all done. Wednesday morning is a lovely morning to wake up, isn't it? That brings us to the end of our agenda for our Committee of the Whole meeting. If it's all right with the board, we'll take a few-minute break because we've been here for some time, and then we will go into our very brief special meeting and take care of the last few items that we have to take care of. We will now be we'll be adjourned for the next. We'll be adjourned, and we will reconvene in about 5 minutes, and we will take care of our special meeting at that time. Thank you. evening. Welcome to the Livonia Public Schools Board of Education special meeting of November 7th, 2022. Mrs. Bradford, would you please take your roll?
Mrs. Acosta.
Here.
Mrs. Bonifield is not here tonight. Mr. Centers.
Here.
Mrs. Jarvis.
Here.
Mr. Johnson.
Here.
Mrs. Bradford says here. President Burton.
Here, and we have a quorum. If you are watching from home this evening, you probably saw our lengthy committee of the whole meeting that preceded this one. We discussed at length the items that are going to be coming up for a vote at this meeting. If you missed that and you'd like to see it again, you can go back to our website, which is livoniapublicschools.org. Oops, thank you. I'm sorry, I just was told that my mic is off. I'm going to start that all again. Good evening. Welcome to the Livonia Public Schools Board of Education special meeting of November 7th, 2022. Mrs. Bradford, would you please take the roll again so that it could be heard by the public?
Sure. Mrs. Acosta.
Here.
Mrs. Bonifield is not here tonight. Mr. Centers.
Here.
Mrs. Jarvis.
Here.
Mr. Johnson.
Here.
Mrs. Bradford says here. President Burton.
Here, and we have a quorum. Thank you. If you missed our earlier discussion at our committee of the whole meeting, we're good. If you missed our earlier discussion at our committee of the whole meeting, we had a lengthy discussion about the two items that are going to be coming up for a vote this evening. Our committee of the whole meetings are the meetings where we discuss items in great detail. Tonight's meeting is a special meeting, and it is just for a vote so that we can get these items rolling quickly as they need to, because supply chain issues have caused such problem worldwide in every industry, and education is not exempt. So we are going to take care of some votes on these this evening so that our purchase orders can begin going through the process and our items can arrive on time. Our agendas can be found, if you're watching from home, on our website, which is www.livoniapublicschools.org. If you hover over the board tab, you can drop down to our agendas, our board meeting information, and there you can find our agendas. We do not have anyone present in our audience at this time to participate in audience communications, so we're going to go on to the next item on our agenda. Item 3 on our agenda is approval of summer 2023 bond renovations bid package, 2021 bond. May I have a motion, please?
President Burton.
Mr. Johnson.
Move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District approve the recommendation from its owner's representative, Plant Moran Cressa, and its construction manager, Clark Construction Company, to approve the contractors identified and the construction project budgets for bid package number 1, Phase 2, 2023 renovations at Cleveland Elementary, Rosedale Elementary, Riley Upper Elementary, Frost Middle School, and Franklin High School, as well as the air conditioning upgrades at Roosevelt Elementary, Webster Elementary, and Stevenson High School, in the total amount of $23,554,369, which includes costs for hard construction, fees, and contingency, and authorize the superintendent or her designee to negotiate and execute final contracts on behalf of the Board of Education with the awarded contractors.
Support.
We have a motion by Mr. Johnson, supported by Mrs. Jarvis. I'd like to, before I turn this over to Mrs. Smith and Mr. Francis, I'd like to just state that I am not certain whether or not my family's company has bid to any of the companies on this list, and out of an abundance of caution, I'm going to be abstaining from the discussion and vote this evening. And this time, I'll turn it over to Mr. Francis.
Thank you very much. We had quite a bit of, it's a unique situation where we just had all this conversation this evening, so it should be all fresh in our minds that these recommended contractors for the 2023 summer projects, they will be the ones that Clark Construction and Plant Moran Cressa are recommending after a public bid and vetting through the post-bid interview process. These contractors will provide the construction work and the HVAC, mechanical engineering, et cetera, work for Cleveland, Rosedale, Riley, Frost, and Franklin, and the air conditioning installation at Cleveland, Roosevelt, Rosedale, Webster, Frost, Franklin, and Stevenson. So this is a planned purchase, a planned project, as we all know. coming out of the 2021 bond fund.
Are there comments or questions from the superintendent or board members? As I want to make sure that folks know that we are not taking this kind of a bid lightly, but we had extensive, an hour or more discussion about this just at our previous meeting. So if you want to hear those details, rewind and watch the meeting before this. Seeing as there are no other comments or questions, I will ask Mrs. Bradford to please take the roll.
Mr. Johnson,
Yes.
Mrs. Jarvis,
Yes.
Mrs. Acosta,
Yes.
Mr. Centers,
Yes.
Mrs. Bradford says yes. President Burton?
Abstain.
Thank you.
And that motion passes. The next item on our agenda is item 4, approval of SAC Furniture and Materials Child Care Stabilization Grant. May I have a motion, please?
President Burton,
Mrs. Jarvis.
move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District approve the purchase of SAC classroom items from Lakeshore Learning in the amount of $35,400.87.
Support.
We have a motion by Mrs. Jarvis, supported by Mrs. Acosta. And we'll hear from Mrs. Smith.
Thank you, President Burton. I'm happy to bring this recommendation before the board tonight. We've been very fortunate to receive grant funds that have allowed us to do some updates to our SAC classrooms. This particular classroom purchase would be for classrooms at Buchanan, Cleveland, Cooper, Riley, and Rosedale. And it's being made through a cooperative purchasing program.
Again, this is another item that we had extensive discussion about on just an hour ago. Are there any other comments or questions from the superintendent or board members? Mrs. Jarvis.
Thank you. I just wanted to say thank you to your team for always looking for grants and applying for those. We appreciate that, and I know it takes a lot of time and effort for them. So again, extend our thanks to the team.
Thank you.
Are there other questions or comments? Seeing none, we have a motion by Mrs. Jarvis, supported by Mrs. Acosta, for approval of SAC Furniture and Materials from the Child Care Stabilization Grant. Mrs. Bradford, would you please take the roll?
Mrs. Jarvis,
Yes.
Mrs. Acosta,
Yes.
Mrs. Bradford says yes. Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Centers?
Yes.
President Burton?
Yes, and that motion passes. That brings us to the end of our brief agenda this evening. We are now adjourned. I wish you all a wonderful evening. Good night.